With its Devil May Cry style combat, and emphasis on graphic violence and other adult content, Final Fantasy XVI represents a new direction for the series. As a result, there's been a lot of chatter about what Final Fantasy is, and whether or not 16 fits into that framework. It's been my favorite series since I was a kid, but I've never stopped to consider what defines it. That's the objective of this video, to figure out for myself as much as anyone, what are the core characteristics of these games that I love so much? To keep it simple, we're going to focus on the mainline titles. No spin-offs or remakes, just FF1 through 16. And of course, these are only my thoughts, so please let me know in the comments what you think. What are the non-negotiables, the elements that Final Fantasy must have? From the beginning, Final Fantasy has embraced change. The series' most defining trait is evolution. FF2 preserves some of its predecessor's basic features, but it's a different experience, featuring a fresh world, story, characters, and gameplay mechanics. Subsequent titles continue that trend, introducing innovative systems like 6's Espers, 7's Materia, and 8's Junction. FF10 abandoned the active time battle system that had been a mainstay since 4, and from then on each new entry completely revamps the combat. Sometimes it's more than evolution, it's full-on revolution. 11 and 14 changed the genre to MMO, while 15 and 16 are fully real-time action RPGs. It's not just gameplay though. Every aspect is subject to change. We've explored settings that run the gamut from classic fantasy to steampunk. The near-future fantasy based on reality seen in 7, 8, and 15. And my personal favorite, 10's Asian-inspired island paradise. A multitude of artists have left their imprint on the series. Yoshitaka Amano, Tetsuya Nomura, and Akihiko Yoshida have distinct styles, yet their character designs are all synonymous with Final Fantasy. 16's characters are designed by the lesser-known Kazuya Takahashi. Still, when we first laid eyes on Clive in the reveal trailer, he was instantly identifiable as a Final Fantasy character. Even when interpreted through the eyes of different artists, the series has discernible styles. The same goes for music. Nobuo Uematsu's legendary work is fundamental to Final Fantasy, yet it continues to thrive long after he stepped down as lead composer. It's incredible that without Uematsu, in my mind clearly the greatest video game composer to ever live, each new title somehow manages to put up an all-time great soundtrack. Hitoshi Sakimoto doesn't get spoken about as often as others, but his wonderful music for 12 brings the world of Ivalice to life. Hate 13 all you want, but Masashi Hamauzu's gorgeous soundtrack is one of the greatest ever. Yoko Shimomura is an absolute goddess, and her work on 15 is sublime. Throughout both 14 and 16, Masayoshi Soken pays tribute to Uematsu's legacy, while also expanding the series' sonic identity with his own eclectic style. But if Final Fantasy is shaped by continual reinvention, how can it have a concrete identity? Frankly, I'm not convinced that it does. There's a creative and aesthetic through-line that links the first 6 games, but beyond that, the series is amorphous. Things started to feel different. Not worse, just different, when figures like Nomura and Yoshinori Kitase gained greater creative control, and eventually when series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi moved on. Yasumi Matsuno's FF12 feels like a black sheep, more in line with his amazing work on spin-offs like FF Tactics and Vagrant Story than any of the mainline titles. And under Naoki Yoshida's leadership, 14 and 16 both pay loving homage to Sakaguchi's work while also pushing storytelling and game design into the next era. There is one thing, though, that connects these stylistically disparate games and differentiates them from other RPGs: production value. Final Fantasy is the AAA RPG. As a result, it always aims for best-in-class story, characters, gameplay, music, and visuals. Pushing the technology to the limit in an attempt to produce generation-defining storytelling is an endeavor that has historically seen undeniable success. From 6's march through the snow as the lights of Narsh slowly flicker into view, to 7's dramatic camera movements that pull back to reveal the scale of Midgar, then push in on the train arriving at the reactor, and 10's bombastic blitzball game while the city of Xanarkand comes under attack, These introductory sequences are showpieces that draw players into the world and set the tone for what's to come. 16's opening is an audiovisual spectacle with deep narrative significance that is very much in line with series tradition. A big budget also brings big expectations, and greatness is the expectation that Final Fantasy has earned for itself. We're not just talking about games that were good for their time. Most Final Fantasies have stood the test of time, and remain among the best the industry has to offer, even decades after release. I think this is one of the major reasons why FF13 and 15 are so maligned. They're not bad games, but they're not great games, and that's not good enough for the best RPG series ever made. As for 16, it remains to be seen how it will be viewed as the years go by. The story, characters, and bosses are strong, but are issues with pacing and quest design enough to keep it from achieving immortality? Time will tell. There's another piece to the puzzle. All of these games are bound together by the classic iconography that we know and love. Chocobos and Moogles, Malboros, Tonberries, Bombs, and Behemoths. Shiva, Ifrit, and Bahamut. The Prelude, main theme, and victory fanfare. Airships, Cid, Biggs and Wedge. The job system, limit breaks, gun blades, and more. Though largely superficial, these elements create a sense of continuity, even when the experiences themselves differ quite radically. FF16, for example, is dark, the first time the series has used graphic violence to tell its story. Yet it still has room for a fluffy Moogle. It goes further. There's a Final Fantasy feeling, a flavor, that's hard to put into words, but you know it when you see it. I'm about to dip into spoiler territory for FF16, so if you haven't finished it yet, please use the timestamps below to skip ahead. Okay, ready? Before departing for the final battle, Clive, Joshua, and Dion say goodbye to the friends who've helped them along their journey. We're treated to some of the most heartwarming interactions in the game before watching our heroes hitch a ride atop Bahamut to go kill a god. It's borderline cheesy but extremely heartfelt. Some of the dialogue is a bit edgelord, but there's a deeper meaning underneath. And while visually spectacular, it's never shallow, because the over-the-top action doesn't lose sight of the characters at the heart of it all. Everything about this sequence screams Final Fantasy. So, back to the original question. What is Final Fantasy? Well, it's a big-budget grab bag that actively seeks to reinvent itself with each installment. A new world, story, and gameplay are built by selecting a handful of those quintessential elements and mixing them with fresh ideas, all the while trying to preserve that elusive FF flavor. Beyond that, there isn't much that's set in stone. A few years down the line, we'll be having the same conversation yet again about FF17. Millions of fans around the world love these games for so many different reasons that it's impossible to make everyone happy. But if it's going to try, 17 will need to offer an interesting world filled with classic icons and new ones, incredible music, deep combat, and most important of all, a captivating story led by compelling characters with convincing relationships. No big deal, just nail all of those things and make one of the best games ever. That's what Final Fantasy is, after all.